Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and start. And first of all, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Allison Vogler, class of 78. Also work here in the Office of Planned Giving at Richmond. Have been back on campus for about 17 years now, working in athletic fundraising and now over in gift planning. So anyway, great to have you here. Thank you for joining us for another virtual First Friday at this new time. Hope that works for everybody. We think it's bringing in some more people. We'll be using the Q&A and chat functions down below. So if you want to ask any questions or interact anytime during the presentation, you're welcome to. And Dr. Datta will access that during the presentation. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our presenter today. It's Monti Datta. He's an associate professor of political science at UR. He teaches classes in international relations, research methods, the US image, and human rights. Monti began to explore meditation in earnest during a year-long sabbatical in Southeast Asia over the 2016-2017 academic year, where he was able to study with a local Vipassana community in Bangkok with a former monk, Harjancho Guwana, who leads a community center for at-risk youth at the Temple of Dawn. Monti currently teaches Kourou meditation at UR and starts off his classes with a couple of minutes of mindfulness to help his students settle in, find their center, and bring more of their full selves to the academic experience. He also works with students to advance issues of social and racial justice at the University of Richmond. And he loves being a spider, and we love having him here today. So take it away, Monti. Thank you.
Wow, hi everybody. Thank you so much to Allison and to Megan for helping put together this event. Hi everybody, my name is Monti Datta. You can just call me Monti. Before we go any further, I wanted to know, is it possible to see people's faces on Zoom, or is this only like a one-way mirror? I'd love just to wave at people if that's possible.
I think the way it's set up, it's just a webinar rather than a Zoom meeting.
Ah, okay. All right.
Sorry. They're out there waving, for sure.
All right. And so, yeah, I just want to welcome people, as I understand it, that this is a community of alums, of former trustees, of people who are connected to the Spider family. And so I just want to welcome you back to U of R. Although admittedly we're in a pandemic right now, and so if I were teaching my class, I'd be wearing a mask like this. And so when I was talking with Megan and Allison today, I think the conversation first began of can I share more of what I'm teaching with one of my classes on human rights and with some of my research on modern slavery. And that's a course about which I'm very, very passionate. But then I said to Megan and Allison, well, wait a minute, you know, there's a lot going on with things happening at the University of Richmond with student activism and, you know, with my own classroom experiences with mindfulness and with meditation. And so we were kind of thinking, what about today could be more of like a back to school day for you guys, and you know, what's going on in the classroom in this pandemic, where we're in this weird model of trying to survive, but also teaching during the pandemic, where some students are on Zoom and then other students are on face-to-face. And that led to a discussion of my work with mindfulness and my work with meditation. And so actually, if people don't mind, because I'm thinking about this as a class of welcome back, I would love to settle in with a moment of mindfulness. I can't see people's faces. I normally like to do this only with consent. So I wonder how I can ask for the consent of everybody to join me for a moment of mindfulness. Um,
We
let's
can have
see.
folks in the chat, if you can just say, give your consent for this, that would be great. We've had a couple folks just to say hello and
Okay.
in there.
All right, let me just give it a moment. If anybody wouldn't mind a moment of mindfulness. Okay, I'm seeing in the chat box, people are coming through. Okay, cool. So I'm feeling good. I always want to do that because I think with the type of pedagogy I use in the classroom, I'm a bit non-traditional. I use methods like meditation now and other tools of social justice and restorative justice. And so now that in the chat, it looks like people are okay with that. What I'm going to do is grab my meditation bell. And this will be for the next couple of minutes. And what I'd like to do now is invite you at home just to get comfy and cozy. And you can be sitting up with your back upright like me, or if you want, you can be laying down. You can even be curled up on the couch with your favorite pet, or maybe you're with a loved one. And what I'm going to do now is actually I'm going to take off my glasses so I can relax a little bit myself. And I'm going to invite you now just to close your eyes if you feel comfortable. And what I'd like to do now is just invite you to begin to settle into a fixed posture, some position that you feel good about in your chair or your couch. And I'd like to invite you now just to start focusing on your breath. Just taking a nice, long, deep in-breath and a nice, long, deep out-breath. Just breathing in and breathing out. Just finding your own rhythm with the breath. Just following the in-breath and following the out-breath. And gently using your breath as your object of awareness, as your object of meditation. And see if you can notice the sensation of the breath. As you breathe in, notice if you're breathing in through your nose or if you're breathing in through your mouth. And as you breathe out, also notice if you're breathing out through your nose or breathing out through your mouth. Just being aware of the flow of the in-breath and the flow of the out-breath. And using this awareness of your breath as your focus of meditation, what I'm going to do is give you about 30 seconds just to continue to follow the breath on your own. But what you'll notice is as you begin to focus on the breath, your mind might wander, thoughts might arise, maybe even thoughts of anxiety about the election. And all that I ask is as the mind wanders, as thoughts arise, you gently say hello to those thoughts. You sit with those thoughts, but then very gently return to the breath. Return to the sensation of the in-breath and return to the sensation of the out-breath. And I will give you now about 30 seconds just to follow your breath on your own. Just breathing in and breathing out. And in a moment, what I'm going to do is ring my meditation bell. And when I ring it, I'd like to invite you for the rest of today's webinar, and maybe even for the rest of today, just to realize that if you're feeling moments of stress, if you're feeling moments of anxiety, you can pause and recenter yourself with the breath. And with that, I want to thank you all for that very short breath awareness. And when you're ready, you can feel free to open your eyes and move and stretch and settle into our webinar for today. And what we just did was something that I do at the beginning of all of my classes now here at U of R. And I realize I can't see your faces, but I would love in the chat if anybody wants to share any words of reflection or reaction of how that was. As students today in this webinar, what was going on, or how did that experience feel like for you guys? And maybe I'll give you a moment on the chat to see if anybody wants to jump on in. I see one phrase that looks like that was needed after a stressful week. Somebody else wrote, I appreciate the chance to mute the news and reflect. Well, cool. It sounds like that was like a positive experience for people. And actually, when I do mindfulness these days in the class, there are really two reasons for it at U of R, or just for any college age student. The generation of students that we are working with today at U of R are of course brilliant and insightful, but this is a generation that has a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, and in the pandemic, almost every metric of mental health is off the charts, whether it's depression or even grinding your teeth late at night, or people who might on the weekends medicate themselves with alcohol. The current generation of college students is I think desperate just to relax, like so many of us. And so I use mindfulness as a tool of what I call inclusive pedagogy. And what I mean by pedagogy, it's a way of teaching, but by inclusive pedagogy, it's a way of first centering with yourself. And we use the breath, we work with the breath, because the breath is something that defines us. The breath is something that we have literally from the moment that we're born in this life until literally the moment we leave this world. And not only that, the breath is also part of our shared experience, whether you're rich or poor, black or white, gay or straight, or American or not, we all have to breathe. And then even symbolically in this world of Black Lives Matter, when we know there are vulnerable people around the world whose necks are literally being suffocated, and whose breath is being extinguished, I think of the breath as a reminder of our shared humanity. And so for all of those reasons, I use the breath. But what the science of meditation shows us is that once you start to work with the breath and slow down with the breath and even regulate the breath by sort of observing and taking a deep breath, you are literally telling your body and its parasympathetic nervous system to relax. And suddenly you're not just calming down in class, you might, as a student, be able to finally let go. And if you can let go, you might be able to have better concentration, and you can be a better note taker and maybe, listening better to lectures. And then even on a philosophical or even a metaphysical level, I use the breath because, you know, I believe it was the philosopher Socrates who said the unexamined life is not worth living. And in my experience, by working with the breath, you literally start to know more of your mind-body connection. And if you're aware of your mind-body connection, you can be aware of your feelings, you can be aware of your thoughts. And once you slow down and calm yourself as a student, you can begin to have more reflection and more self-inquiry and more critical inquiry, literally just starting with the breath. And so ultimately in my classes, what I also do now is I invite students to think more about working with the breath and what does it mean to be mindful? What does it mean to be mindful not only of the breath, but to be mindful of your thoughts, to be mindful of the words that we use for one another, to be mindful of our actions. And actually this semester, I've actually created an assignment, and the assignment is called the Mindful Leader. And it's about using an example of your favorite leader. It could be a leader in world history or somebody who you just know personally, maybe a loved one or a friend or a family member. And the goal is to first pick that leader that you admire. And then secondly, once you've picked that leader, you describe what their values are that draw you to that leader. And then the third element of the assignment is to talk about what that leader would say or do in the pandemic right now and how the pandemic is affecting different communities of color disproportionately because of the legacy of systemic racism in the United States and the legacy of structural inequality in America. And then finally, the student for that assignment is asked to talk about what would be the consequences of those words or actions that that leader would say or do, and then how thinking about that leader has affected their own sense of what it means to be a leader in our society today. And actually this assignment, the Mindful Leader, I actually put it together with a friend of mine, Mr. Hartanto Gunawan, who's a Buddhist monk who lives in Southeast Asia. And he works with at-risk youth. For his students at his community center in Thailand, it's a normal community center and the kids go to school and they volunteer. But what they do is they meditate every morning. They actually wake up at 4 to 4:30 every morning. And in the evening, they also meditate and they meditate for about an hour in the morning and about half an hour at night. And the idea that I've learned from this community center is by working with your breath, by working with your thoughts, by slowing down, you can begin to know who you are. And if you know who you are, then you can have more self-worth, more self-esteem, and more confidence. And not only that, you can begin to see others clearly for who they are. So as you guys can tell in this webinar, I've really drunk the Kool-Aid on mindfulness, because for me, if we're more mindful students, we're not just more mindful students, we're more mindful citizens. And when most people are talking in our political culture is one in which we're always cutting each other off, or we're waiting for the other person to stop talking so we can jump in. But with mindfulness and mindful listening and mindful speaking, we're not waiting for somebody to shut up so we can jump in. We're waiting for them to talk more so we can listen and hold that space so we can see other people in their full complexity, not as caricatures or stereotypes that I think we've sometimes become in our nation's political history. So that was a bit of a spiel about why I meditate and how I use mindfulness in the classroom. And I appreciate that you guys could join me. But let me pause for a moment now and see if there are any questions or reactions before I jump on to my next bit about what I've done with mindfulness or how I'm working with mindfulness with other faculty at the University of Richmond.
of anything at this moment. I can definitely, as we continue, interject if anything pops up.
All right. So yeah, if in the chat box people have any questions or comments, but what I'm going to do now is I want to do two other things today for our webinar. I want to show you a little bit more of what's going on at U of R for mindfulness, and then I want to shift gears and talk to you a little bit more about what's going on with student activism at U of R. So I'm going to share my screen now. And the first thing I want to do is direct your attention to yours website. This is a link from the Office of the Provost. And maybe I can actually put this in the chat box as well. And
Monti, we did have a question come in from
okay.
Leah. Do you find students are taking mindfulness into their other classes?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so actually, because of this work through the Office of the Provost, I am part of a group of colleagues now who are offering mindfulness at U of R. Right now, there's me, there's Dr. Jennifer Cable in music, there's Dr. Kathleen Scarrett in religious studies, there's Roger Mankostropa in academic skills, and there are several other colleagues, and together there are about a dozen of us on campus. And what we're trying to do is sort of create this web or this fabric of mindfulness across the curriculum at U of R. We've actually wanted to try to brand it, calling it MAC, Mindfulness Across the Curriculum. And we tried to do this about 2 years ago, but at the time some faculty were a little burned out on administrative programming. But the goal is through these faculty learning communities, like the one on mindfulness. What we're hoping is that more students can not only go to my class, but to go to other classes, and they're sort of feeding into this type of pedagogy for more classes at U of R. But before any of that can be done, we have to train more teachers on how to teach mindfulness. And so there was a program that I'm sharing right now called Kourou. And about 1.5 years ago, through the Office of the Provost, we were able to get the Kourou program offered. And Kourou is a program of meditation on how to teach meditation to college-age students over a 4-week curriculum. And the course originates from Duke University. And the course starts with week 1, you teach students how to breathe properly from their bellies. And then week 2, you teach other meditation techniques, including eating meditation, walking meditation, and even loving kindness meditation. And about 1.5 years ago, we through the generous sponsorship of the Office of the Provost, we got Kourou to come to U of R, and they trained about 30 faculty and staff. And among those faculty and staff, a small number, I think 4 or 5 or 6, have completed all of the steps to be a certified Kourou teacher. And so I'm one of those teachers now, in addition to Kathleen Scarrett, Jennifer Cable, and Roger Mankostropa. And our hope is there can be more teachers on U of R's campus who know how to teach the college-age students. I don't know how many of you have heard the news about the new Wellbeing Center, but over the next academic year, U of R is opening a new center devoted strictly to wellness. And wellness also includes mindfulness and meditation. And so my big hope, I guess my end game is I don't want wellness only for U of R. I want wellness for the city of Richmond. As you all know, Richmond is amazing as a campus, but we're kind of in this bubble on the West End. And as all of you know, the city of Richmond is a city rife with social and racial injustice. And there are parts of the city, for example, the Richmond City Jail, which sits literally on top of the old sites of the slave auction houses before the Civil War. And what I want is I want U of R to be a place where people from the city of Richmond can come and they can learn how to take a deep breath. They can learn how to relax and learn how to meditate. And what the research shows with elementary school students, with middle school students and high school students, if there are any students in the community from at-risk populations, they're at risk for incarceration because of systemic racism, the research shows that meditation works and that students who meditate are less likely to go to school suspension. And if they're less likely to be suspended, there's less likely in life to be incarcerated. And so for me, meditation for the community is something that I'm hoping that U of R can offer, but we first have to get enough faculty and staff trained on how to teach meditation. And so right now there's just a small group of about 5 of us, but I'm hoping, in a few years, there can be 10 of us, 15 of us, 20 of us. And my big hope is that U of R is one day known as a school where we really think about wellness. And we're not just graduating students to get good jobs, we're graduating them on how to be mindful and wise leaders, on how to make decisions that reflect their deepest values. And they can come to know their deepest values by slowing down, by working with the breath, and just literally by breathing, you can know more who you are. Now, I know that that's probably a bit out there because this is very, very unconventional pedagogy. But it's something that I'm hoping U of R catches on in the months and years ahead. But so far, so good. I have not had one student yet in any of my classes who says, Dr. Datta, I really hated meditation today. Nobody says that. If anything, they want to meditate more, and they want permission as students to be able to say it's okay to relax. The culture at U of R is very competitive, and if you're within earshot of students on campus, sometimes students will brag to one another about how little sleep they're getting or how they're not taking care of their bodies. But for me, wellness means you listen to your body, and it means that you take care of your body, starting with that breath and that awareness of the breath. So that's a little bit about Kourou and what's going on through the office of the provost. This is a link just to my homepage on mindfulness. I'll send you guys a link to this in the chat as well. As I take more of these risks as an educator to brand myself as a mindfulness practitioner, I'm offering meditation not only to the city of Richmond, but I also teach Richmond in the mindfulness in the community. And one program that I offer meditation to is called the Real Life Program. And the Real Life Program is an initiative in downtown Richmond. It's on East Main Street. And the goal of the Real Life Program is to work with men and women who were formerly incarcerated in the Commonwealth of Virginia as they seek to reclaim their lives. And as you might know, most people who are formerly incarcerated are suffering with a number of mental health issues. They're suffering from drug addiction. They're suffering from alcoholism. And they literally just want to be able to relax. And so what I do about once a week on Wednesday mornings is I just sit online via Zoom with a group of these men and women just to sort of talk to them about breath awareness and to have that moment of mindfulness. And so far, once again, there are no complaints. Nobody says, I hate this opportunity to meditate. The reaction, if anything, is thank you for this allowed moment just to relax. Thank you for this allowed moment just to breathe. When in our society, I think we overdo it. And at U of R, we, among our majors, there's still a campus culture of one major isn't enough. You have to have a double major. And if you have a double major isn't enough. You have to have a double major and a minor. And there's so much competition at U of R. Our students are not taught on how to take care of themselves first. They're taught on how to optimize their GPA first rather than self-care. And what I want to do is hopefully flip that script and flip that narrative about self-care and self-worth. Because if you invest in yourself in the long run, if you're investing in your mental health and your wellness, I think you're going to make more money later in life. You're going to be less depressed later in life, and everybody benefits. But that's more of the long-term perspective of things. That was another big spiel. Let me just pause for a moment to see if there are any questions or anything going on in the chat before I jump to the next topic about recent student activism on campus. All right, in that case, let me jump ahead. So that was a little bit first about back to school in my classroom. And if you guys were in my class, that's how we literally would have started off. But in terms of other updates at the University of Richmond, I don't know how many of you follow the Collegian, but last January on campus, on the Collegian, the Collegian reported a series of xenophobic incidents on campus at U of R. And there was one student who I know personally from Pakistan, and somebody had written racial epithets on her dormitory wall. And it was a big story that had broken out on the Collegian, in addition to some other xenophobic and racist incidents that took place on campus. And what happened was a number of student clubs began to rally, and they began to protest. And so what they did was they decided to eventually form the structure of what will be called eventually the Equity Summit at the University of Richmond. And we were going to have the Equity Summit last spring, but as you know, the pandemic broke out. And so instead, the Equity Summit was postponed until this fall semester. And over the summer, I started meeting with two student leaders and one staff member from the Center for Civic Engagement at U of R. And we began to put together a leadership structure. And we were very, very mindful of me being a faculty member, working with a staff member and two students. We wanted to have this conversation where it just wasn't faculty telling students what to do, or it wasn't faculty telling staff what to do. We were really listening to each other. And then as the summer continued, the students began to recruit other student leaders. And by the end of the summer, they began to brand and put their sort of logo on Instagram. And on Instagram, there's, I can put this also in the chat box. Let me share this with you guys.
We've had a question come in.
Okay.
I've heard a few times that we don't have a large activist culture on our campus as compared to, say, VCU. What do you think about that? You have a different perspective.
Well, I would agree, and I think you know, VCU or even William and Mary has more of an activist culture. And what I found exciting is through this Equity Summit, we had eventually about 24 student leaders at U of R who put together over 2 nights a couple of sessions on Zoom. And the sessions, they were branded here. Let me show you some of the infographics. So here was one branded session on, they were promoting a session on xenophobia. And so here's the Instagram posting. And it reads, xenophobia in terms of COVID-19, Kung Flu seriously. Let's address this. Coming soon at the Equity Summit. And here's another posting about white privilege. And so you've got, the proverbial iceberg, the tip of the iceberg. White privilege, how does it look on campus? And what I felt so proud about is for one of the rarest moments that I've seen in my past 11 years at U of R, we finally had this big moment of activism that students led. And we had about, on the first night on Zoom, about 300 students and some faculty and some staff and some administrators participate. And it was one of the first moments in my recent memory of U of R that we began to have the beginnings of an activist culture. And because of the pandemic, we've not been able to have a face-to-face gathering yet. But I know some of these student leaders are planning also online workshops for the spring, focusing on the subject of microaggressions. And so I think the students at U of R, they want more of an activist culture, but they're looking for precedent. They're looking for role models. And I'm hoping that this Equity Summit was the first, but not the last. Or here's another ad from the Instagram page about Africana studies. About a year ago, after those xenophobic and racist incidents on campus, a group of students proposed an Africana studies program at U of R. And right now, we're not sure if the university will sign off on this. The students want it, but there's a conversation now about, if we were to have an Africana studies program, who would fund it, who would staff it, and the university is a bit a bit slower in its response than what students want. But we're seeing the seeds of activism at U of R. And then just to show you guys, let me share with you another link. This is an op-ed that I wrote with those two student leaders and the one staff member about the Equity Summit as we were processing what the Equity Summit meant to us. And what we're hoping is through the example of the Equity Summit, we can show the campus that, number one, it's okay to talk about difficult issues. It's okay to talk about xenophobia, about white privilege, about anti-Semitism. And even if we talk about it, we're not going to make things worse at U of R. We might actually make things better. And I think students at U of R, they want this. They want to be able to talk about these hard issues. But the challenge is, because we live in a campus bubble, things catch on very slowly. And my hope is that talking with you guys today as alumni, as former Spider or part of our Spider community, my wish personally is we can have more of these conversations about race and racism and how it affects U of R. Or there are some other taboo topics that we don't talk about on campus that I think students want to talk about, or that alumni want to talk about. But we still need to brand this and market this. We need to put this more on our website. We need to put this more in our marketing materials and legitimate it. So I feel good that our student leaders have begun to sort of rise up and say they want to be activists. But the challenge is students graduate every 4 years, and so activists come and go. The other bigger challenge is, how do you create a culture of institutionalized activism at U of R? How do you encourage staff and administrators to say, for example, okay, heaven forbid there's the next Sandy Hook or Douglas Freeman mass shooting. Heaven forbid that happens. Can we as a university stop and pause and reflect in that mindful way and just talk about these issues? We're not there yet as a campus at U of R, but every administrator I speak with privately, candidly, they want that. but they look to the students now for that leadership. And strangely enough, the students are looking to administrators for that leadership as well. And so this op-ed that I wrote that you see here, I co-authored it with two students, with Tommy Na and Hijab Fatima, and one staff member, Blake Staff. What we were hoping to show through this example is faculty and students and staff can work together, and we can publicly talk about difficult issues, and that won't hurt our branding as a campus. That won't hurt our rankings on small liberal arts colleges. If anything, our branding and our image and rankings will go up. But we're not there yet. But I'm hoping by this time next year, we can have a second annual equity summit and then a third annual summit. And then in time, we might have a whole different body of students who come to U of R because they realize U of R is a place of wellness. They realize U of R is a place of activism, in addition to getting an outstanding liberal arts education. So that was, again, another long spiel for me, and I'm mindful of the time, so maybe I'll pause again for a moment and see if there are questions or anything on Q&A. And oh, here's one other question. What has impressed you about students during this period of unrest and uncertainty between the pandemic, the issues of race relations, and what are my hopes for the campus? I think my biggest hope is a bit paradoxical. As you guys can probably tell in this webinar, I'm probably more to the political left than the political right. You've probably been able to sense that. Strangely enough, my hope for U of R is, given our deeply politicized nature as a country, I want all of our students to feel more included, even students who feel they are to the far right conservatively, just as much as students might feel included to the far left politically. Right now, students who maybe voted for Trump don't feel safe on campus because they know that's not politically correct. And if we are to be a liberal arts college, if we are to talk about what's on our minds or hearts as a nation, we have to teach our students it's okay to be honest with themselves. We're not there yet. Academically, I don't know if you all know this, but most PhDs are more liberal than conservative. It's just this demographic trend. So most academics come with a bias that tends to be a little bit more Democratic than Republican. My hope or wish is we can have all of our students feel they can bring their full humanity, their full totality to the classroom, whether they're pro or con on any issue. And we allow our students to be able to speak their minds or hearts, not in any way that might be offensive, but where they don't have to hide their authentic selves. And if we can create more of that culture on campus, I think U of R has the ability to be the top liberal arts college in the nation. If we were to facilitate more of that culture. And admittedly, that takes a lot of risk taking, because you have to tell students, it's okay to speak your truth. And that's not the norm in our society today. And instead, people say what they think on social media, not necessarily in the classroom, face-to-face, person-to-person. But unless we have those hard dialogues about race and racism, about gay marriage, or about healthcare, we're not going to ever, I think, be able to move forward as a United States of America, as a united country. And so with that, I'm also mindful of the time, but let me see if there are any other questions in the chat as I take a peek there. Well, in that case, I would say in my final couple of minutes that I've got, I think I want to say a couple of things. First, I want to express my gratitude that we're all here today online. I want more alums to be involved with U of R, and I want your voices to be more heard and included. And so when we have a next equity summit, I would love for more alums to be involved, and maybe this can be one mechanism to allow that. Oh, and here's one more question. Let's see, do you feel a majority of faculty share your sentiments about students being able to express themselves? The faculty right now are I think really struggling with how to balance freedom of speech with their own personal views. And so I would say some faculty who might teach different subjects, they don't want to bother as much with these issues that are politicized. For example, if you're teaching mathematics or computer science, those might be rather apolitical topics. But among my colleagues in the social sciences, a lot of us are, I would say, soul searching right now, because a lot of us are wondering, what is best for our nation? And sometimes people have knee-jerk reactions to what students say. And so for a lot of faculty, they might have to feel they self-censor what they say as well, because they want to appear to be objective or neutral. When my personal point of view is that you bring your full self to the classroom, and even if you're liberal or not and you say it, the kids are going to figure it out, because they're so smart. They're going to see it whether or not you say it. And so I'd say right now, a lot of my colleagues in the faculty, they're reluctant to go in this direction because it's so unconventional. But when I have these conversations with my students about Trump or Biden, I mean, they open up like a bouquet of flowers. And even students at the far right, they'll say, but Dr. Datta, what about this? And they know that I'm not judging them for their authenticity. And if they feel that level of safety, then they can say what they really think and get it off their chests. But that trying to create that level of a safe space in the classroom is, sometimes I get it right and sometimes I get it wrong. But that's where I'm hoping we can go more personally as a campus.
Does anyone else have questions for Monti? I want to be in your class.
Actually, I would love for more staff to mix it up with students. We're so siloed away, and it's a paradox of our size. We're a small college, and the smaller we are, the more we don't know who we are, right? So I wish we could do more with staff and students and break those boundaries.
Indeed, indeed. Well, if we don't have any other further questions, I think we can go ahead and thank you so much, Monti, for sharing and spending time with us. I know I've gotten a lot out of it. I think everyone on the webinar has too. And we're just so lucky to have you on our campus and part of the community. I know I'm really proud that you're a Spider, and thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you'll save the date for our next First Friday, which will be on December 4th. And we're going to go with this time period again from 12 to 1. And remember to check out the alumni Facebook page, Instagram. I got a new follow. I'm going to follow that UR Equity account. That looks great. So alumni events are always posted on those two accounts. On the website, you can get additional information on more exciting virtual events coming up. I know we're all looking forward to non-virtual events, but until then, hope to see everybody soon. Thanks for staying safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next First Friday. Thank you, Monti. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone.